Hey, thanks for tuning into my podcast. This is Big Head on the Block, hosted by me, Tim Henderson, aka Big Head. Hey, welcome back to Big Head on the Block. Today we're going to talk about something that's pretty intriguing to most people, especially in the Baton Rouge and surrounding areas. We're going to be talking about gangs. We're going to talk about my experience in the intelligence division with gangs, and also today's guest, Darryl Michelli, who is the commander and captain of the East Baton Rouge Sheriff Department Intelligence Division. Welcome, Darryl.
Good morning, Tim. Thanks for inviting me on to your podcast.
Yep, glad to have you. Now, for everyone out there listening, the mic quality, again, is going to be a little bit less because I'm having to interview Darryl over my speakerphone in order to get this information from him because, as you know, Darryl is high speed. It's hard to pin him down for an extended period of time. So let's get right into it. I need a subject matter expert, and that's why I decided to call upon you. Darryl, if you would, give us a little background on where you started your police career and where you're currently assigned.
Tim, I started my career at Angola in 1983, and I worked there during the 80s. I transferred to LTI, and then I got hired by the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office in 1992 at the Parish prison, and I joined the SCAT team they created in 94. And then from there, I went to uniform and then armed robbery and burglary, and then eventually to the intelligence division.
And that's where you're currently assigned?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm currently captain in the intelligence division.
Darryl, let's talk about gangs in Baton Rouge. So are they structured the same as like large gangs in other cities, or do we have a kind of segment of areas of town that kind of nickname themselves as gangs? Kind of give us a little overview of what your views are.
Yeah, they kind of a lot of them are local, like certain areas of Baton Rouge. But then that isn't always the case. Baton Rouge is so spread out. So you may have a gang member that's from another neighborhood on the other side of town, but he affiliates with a gang that's on that side of town. So they're not as territorial with turfs.
So what about structure? Are they, like some of the larger gangs that you hear about, Crips and Bloods and stuff? How are our gangs in this area compared to those type?
Well, they have structure. They'll have a leader. They'll have their captains that are right under them. A lot of them deal in narcotics, gun trafficking, things of that sort.
So everybody knows when you talk about the Crips and the Bloods, like from LA, that, there's red, there's blue. Do our gangs have anything that defines them as far as colors or tattoos or anything that you're aware of?
Some of them do. They will wear colors. A lot of them, they'll also wear like jewelry types of chains. Tattoos are real common with some of the gangs that we deal with.
On most of the gangs, are they involved, like just from my experience and my impression of the gangs in Baton Rouge are this: they're structured, they're just not highly structured, which is beneficial to the police department and to the sheriff department and all the other agencies that are out here, kind of monitoring the gangs. If they were any more structured, it would cause even that much more of a problem. Right now, they're kind of loose affiliations with people in certain areas. So one area of town has gang A, one area of town has gang B. You say they're not territorial, so you saying that it's okay for them to cross paths in other areas, or they would just pretty much not go into other gang, rival gang territory? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think, that could be a problem with some of them if they go into another area and they're enemies, but they don't have turfs like, if they cross a certain block or a certain street or an intersection where you have these cities that are more congested and they're tagging signs and buildings where their turf is. We don't see as much of that.
Okay, that's a good point. I didn't think about the density aspect of it. Because Baton Rouge is spread out, like you said, a lot of the gangs, from my experience, and I think you'll agree with me on this, they're based in a neighborhood. When I say they're based in a neighborhood, it doesn't mean that the neighborhood's consumed with gang members, because there's a lot of neighborhoods that have a vast majority of really good people that are just wanting to have a good quality of life. Every neighborhood in Baton Rouge is not gang affiliated, but a lot of them are. But they typically name their gangs to associate with either a street in the neighborhood or a neighborhood. Would you find that consistent?
Yes, in some cases, that is true. They have some of them that are named after neighborhoods and streets, and we even have some of them that name them after addresses.
So like the Zion City area, they use 5400 because that's the street number on Cadillac Street. In Banks, there's Bankstown Mafia because, they're predominantly from the Banks area. Is that something that you kind of see consistently throughout the Baton Rouge gangs?
Yes, that is true.
Darryl, in reference to street gangs, when I was an intel operative with Baton Rouge City Police, we dealt mostly with black gangs that operated in and around the Baton Rouge area. I know through experience and conversation and intelligence meetings that there are white gangs and outlaw motorcycle gangs that are operating in the parish and surrounding parishes. And for those who don't live in Louisiana, a parish is the same thing as a county. Darryl has jurisdiction over a whole parish. Contained within the parish is Baton Rouge City, which was where my jurisdiction was. So tell us a little bit about the white gangs. Are they operating on the street? Are they operating in the prison system? And then touch a little bit on the OMCs, the Outlaw Motorcycle Clubs.
Yeah, we have in the prison system, one of our larger gangs would be the Shark Life gang. They started with out of East Baton Rouge, and they was more of your white guys. They started getting into Catahoula prison system in East Baton Rouge, and they started getting their numbers up about 10 years ago. Most of our jails, even Angola, has a few of them in there now that are lifers in there. So that's a very large prison gang. They mostly they're kind of most of those guys are going to be white. They're going to have tattooing on their faces, heavy tattooing. They'll have the pyramid between their eyebrows. That's like a Freemason pyramid, and they'll have the LOD under their eye, loyalty or death. Heavy stitches, like little lines on their mouth. That means never snitch. And of course, they'll have the sharks on their neck and arms representing Shark Life.
So the Shark Life Club, the Shark Life gang that you're referring to, this basically is a white prison gang, somewhat similar to, say, an Aryan Brotherhood type gang?
Yes, yes and no. I've seen where they have affiliations with different street gangs and things. So they're not heavily they're not like Aryan Nation Brotherhood. They will have a black in there or Hispanic on certain occasions. We'll run across them.
Okay, so it's not necessarily race based. It's more of a numbers thing, and then whether this particular person, either a black or Hispanic or whatever, would fit into whatever their agenda is basically what you're saying?
That is correct. Yes, Tim.
So like the Shark Life gang, do they have any influence? I know the Aryan Brotherhood gangs and stuff, sometimes their influence spills out onto the street. Do you think the Shark Life gangs and these other gangs that are in a prison have just internal power, or do they have external power on the streets of Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas?
Yes, they have a system of communicating, which is they either by the phone lines, of course, or either by kites, as they call them.
Man, and I've seen some documentaries. I worked in a prison, and so did you. And we experienced some of this personally, but mostly on some of these documentaries I've seen. Man, these guys have so much time. They wrote one letter in urine, and it looked basically invisible. They heated it up in some capacity when it came from when it went from one person to another. They were able to heat it up, some kind of heating source. The code actually came onto the paper. So they will find ways of communicating. There's no way that you're ever going to stop prison gangs from communicating with each other. The funny thing is, some of the things that they think of to pass these messages, man, it's mind-boggling. But back to the influence on the external, you probably think that they're mostly the power source is mostly in the prison, and they don't really operate in the general population of, not general population, that's a prison term, but in the population of the communities in the Baton Rouge and surrounding areas?
The Shark Life guys they're very influential in the jail systems, and they can be extremely violent. Usually that's where they that's where their power lays, is especially in the prison systems. They're known for being extremely violent with other inmates that maybe don't follow the rules that they establish in the cell blocks and dormitories that they're in.
Okay, so let's transition to the outlaw motorcycle clubs. I know that there are some operating in our area. Do you know of any particular that may be operating in the, let's just say, Louisiana area, and not even break it down to Baton Rouge or East Baton Rouge Parish? Let's just say in Louisiana. Do you know of any operating that may have influence in our area?
Yes. Well, the Banditos have always pretty much controlled a lot of Louisiana. They wear that lower rocker on their cuts, and they have Sons of Silence that run portions of Louisiana. Well, in the last 5 years, OMCs, outlaw motorcycle clubs, have changed a lot in Louisiana. We have Mongols popping up all over especially in South Louisiana. We have pagans that are basically, you can see them in Livingston, Baton Rouge, riding around. So we have a lot of new outlaw motorcycle clubs in Louisiana that we're currently having to deal with.
Okay, and for those who don't know a lot about OMCs, they typically are known historically, and I've never arrested any of them for any of this, so I'm not speaking from any kind of personal experience, but the types of crimes that they commit aren't usually crimes that are against citizens in the community. They typically will run guns, dope, maybe do some enforcement stuff, but typically they don't really have that big an impact on society as far as our day-to-day activity. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, they run under the radar pretty well. Becoming a member of an outlaw motorcycle club is a long process. The initiation process from being a prospect, where they take them in and they give them a little prospect patch, and then they go around doing a lot of the dirty work for the club, and then they eventually get their cuts, which is, to them, earning that cut is one of the greatest moments in their life, most of them.
Yeah, it's something equivalent in the sports world of maybe winning the national championship. Those cuts, they live for them, but they'll also die for them. And my suggestion is, if you ever see somebody that's got a patch on, don't necessarily think that they're the ones you need to approach, because they're usually pretty well versed at violence, when it's necessary. So that's just some advice I'm giving to our listeners. I don't think anybody necessarily would.
Tim, with the outlaw motorcycle clubs, the prospects take a lot of the chances, so they're willing to do whatever they got to do. They'll go to jail. They're wanting to be respected and earn their respect of the club. So a lot of times, if you have a bar or something they're going to that night, or they're having a church meeting, they're gonna the first thing you'll see pull up would be the prospects, and then eventually you're gonna see the members pulling up, and that type of activity there.
And when for our viewers, for our listeners, whenever he says church, they're not actually going to church. That's just their particular meaning for their meeting, their internal meeting that they have. So they're not actually going to a church. That's just what they refer to it as. Let's, Darryl, I want to transition back to the street gangs in Baton Rouge. When I was in the intelligence division, our chief had a press conference one time. And Darryl, in this press conference, the chief told the media, I have an intelligence division that is experienced in interrupting violence. And I truly believed that was our focus and our objective, to interrupt violence. So we termed ourselves violence interrupters. We thought we were already doing the job, and we think that he understood what we were doing because we were in line with administration's ideals and ideology, if you will. We had similar beliefs. So our objective was this. We did everything we could to get data, raw intelligence, whatever we could, to find out if there was going to be violence, and we tried to stop the violence from occurring prior to it happening. I believe we were very successful in the 2018 era, and I think the data will probably show that to some extent. We didn't do a shotgun blast approach. We did a precise sniper type approach. We got a sniper rifle, and we pointed it at the bad guys, if you were the leader of a gang, if you were a known offender, a trigger puller. My division, Mac Thomas, Brandon Sanders, myself, eventually Gayton, Montgomery, and Brad Barr were added to our division to make it a 5-man team. We went out face to face and said, hey, we know what you're doing. It's our objective to either get you to stop or we're going to make you stop by incarcerating you. Now, because of our status on the street and the fact that, we were pretty known as far as Baton Rouge goes, I believe the offenders understood that we were serious and that they were going to stop or they were going to go to jail, one or the other. Now, we were very respectful, but let me say this. We had very direct discussions with these individuals because cops don't like people that pull the trigger. We tell them in no uncertain terms, either or. We don't give them a lot of opportunity to come up with a, hey man, maybe this, maybe that. No. You stop or we're going to stop you. Would you say that your agency and your division has similar ideas on targeting these guys and letting them know, hey, we watching you?
Yes, believe me, they're on notice. We're in and out of the prison interviewing gang members when they come into the prison system, whether it's in our parish or other parishes. And intelligence is just one leg of the whole system. I mean, we have our narcotics division and the armed robbery, burglary, and our other divisions we're all connected. We all work together very closely. We have some very big operations in Baton Rouge that have had very good success. I mean, because your gangs, a lot of the money comes in is through narcotics trafficking and gun trafficking and things of that sort. So it's a group effort. It takes a team effort to really work these guys and get them put in, if they're breaking the law, get them incarcerated, get them off the street.
Yeah, and this something you said was very important to our listeners. You have to have communication interdepartmentally, but you also have to have communication with surrounding agencies, because what happened in Baton Rouge also affects what happens in East Baton Rouge Parish and Livingston Parish and other parishes, because these guys don't have boundaries. I worked a case one time with a gang member from a whole nother parish. He was committing crimes in that parish and then coming back here. And one of the events specifically, he did a carjacking up there and brought it back down here, and we recovered the vehicle and we made the arrest on him. But without communication, we would have not known that. And early in our career, there was not a lot of communication between agencies. But, you had your turf, we had ours. It's not that egos played an issue in it. It was just how it was. But now everybody shares and communicates with each other. So it's harder for these criminals to do something in other areas. And that's important that the people that are listening understand. These officers, sheriff deputies, and everything from the surrounding agencies, they're talking to each other. They know if gang member A commits a crime in St. Tammany Parish, we're more than likely going to be dealing with them in Baton Rouge, but there'll be communication so we can take a targeted approach. And it makes it harder for them to have success operating outside of their boundaries. Your division, your narcotics division, Baton Rouge City Police Narcotics Division, street crimes, your SCAT team, all these other organizations, they focus on the gang members, the gang activity, but they also focus on the vice crimes that you talked about, because these gang members are selling drugs, selling weapons, they're committing violence. So it's a team approach, like Darryl said. Everybody has to communicate and everybody has to be one mission, one goal, and that's to take the very small percentage of violent people and incarcerate them whenever they do something wrong. And I commend you and all the people that work in your department, as well as all the other surrounding agencies, including Baton Rouge City, for communicating. And the district attorney has a hand in that also. They communicate, and we're able to talk to them. And I'm sure you talk to them about, making sure this person gets prosecuted, because a lot of people get arrested, right, Darryl? So, we need to make sure they understand gang member A just got arrested. This is a case and this is how it's presented. So communication is vital. And I think I would want you to tell me your opinion, but I think law enforcement shares information now more than they ever have.
Yes, that's for sure, Tim. Our networking system is just, it's like on steroids. We starts at, at the lower street level where we have our SCAT teams and our strike units with the city and the sheriff's office and our narcotics divisions, our armed robbery and burglary divisions, even our auto theft divisions, and we all work together networking information. We're always sharing it all over the different parishes, even in South Louisiana and North Louisiana. And we have our fusion centers. Our fusion centers are in every state where information is processed, and it's if we have some guys from here committing crimes in California or they're committing crimes in New Jersey, we're probably going to know about it pretty quickly through our fusion centers. And fusion centers are ran by the state police in each state, and it's what it is. We share information. So it's the networking we have now is on a whole different level than what it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, and just to give an example, I included Darryl and his team in an investigation we were having involving a murder that we thought happened in Iberville Parish. As we made several arrests, and we targeted it not from arresting for the actual murder, but some vice arrests to actually get this guy off the street, we determined that the body was dumped in Iberville Parish, but the crime actually happened in Baton Rouge. So we actually had to take over the investigation. But initially, we worked with these other agencies. So there was at least 3 agencies involved, my agency, your agency, and theirs. And we were able to make an arrest, which led to additional arrests. Some of the people we identified in that particular case, and I won't mention the case because I don't know that it's been totally adjudicated, but we had one guy put away for murder. And in the second case, he was arrested by us, I think given a 10 or 12-year sentence, and then arrested for another murder. So communication is important. So everybody pay attention to what I'm fixing to tell you. For those who think the cops, and this is for the listeners, not the bad guys, I could care less what they hear. The cops are out here trying. I know there's a lot of violent crime, but Darryl is still employed. I'm not. I'm retired. But we dealt with a segment of youth that's intending on committing violence, and there's really almost no way to stop them because they just simply do not care. They don't care who they target, and they don't care if there's any innocent victims. If they intend on shooting somebody, they're going to do it regardless. And y'all hear things on the news every day, both locally and nationally. Just know that even though you're hearing this and it seems like, why can't police do more? Police are doing as much as they can for the most part right now. You just have to make a case. You can't make a case in 45 minutes like they do on Chicago PD in their intelligence division. Some of these cases, and Darryl, you can tell me if I'm wrong, some of these cases you can do in a day, a week, a month, some take 6 months or a year.
Yes, that's correct. Some of our cases take quite a few. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of manpower. It takes a lot of different agencies. A lot of time, a lot of different divisions. It's a lot of work put into these cases, and the goal is to get these dangerous individuals off the street. And we've been very successful in the last few years at doing that.
Yeah, and look, I've been retired for 2 years, but, I spent the last 3 years of my career focused on gangs, and I can tell you, we put a lot of them in jail. The problem that as a police officer or sheriff deputy that you encounter is this. You have to make a case. You have to have probable cause to make an arrest. We may know who did it, but we can't prove it, and everybody gets the benefit of the doubt until we get probable cause, and then we can make the arrest. The second dynamic of that is you have to make a good case that a DA can prosecute, because they're going to look at your arrest and all your documents, and then they're going to say, hey, this is a good case, or hey, this is lacking. So just because you make a case and make an arrest doesn't necessarily mean it'll be prosecuted. And there's a multitude of reasons why, but we'll just say one is the case lacks a particular merit. So, the justice system is from the cop to the DA to the prosecution, which, the judge or jury will make a determination. And look, sometimes the jury finds these people not guilty, even though we felt like we presented a strong case. I just want the listeners to know that it's not as cut and dry as somebody saying, hey, Darryl, I saw JoJo, or I heard JoJo shot somebody on the interstate, or shot somebody, on a surface street somewhere. And us just go and arrest them. It doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, that's correct, Tim. When we take in that intel on these guys, it's got to be, verified. We go through a lot of steps to verify the information, and it's good information.
And look, we get I'm sorry to cut you off. We get a lot of information from informants. We get a lot of information from relationships that we have developed over the years. And to me, that's the most vital. I always said I was a chief of police in Killian for a brief time, and I did a interview, and I told our community, the community of Killian, I said, listen, we are few, y'all are many. We have few eyes, y'all have many eyes. We need y'all to be watching, and we need y'all to feel comfortable calling us and letting us know what happened. When you involve the community and they feel like they can trust you, they're more willing to give information. Now, in today's society, people like me and people like Darryl, we have developed a trust and rapport with a lot of these people in the communities that we serve for decades, okay? They trust Darryl. They'll call Darryl and tell Darryl something they may not tell any other cop because they know Darryl is going to do something with the information and he's not going to stick them out or, add them to a case and make them be interviewed if that's not what they wanted. Would you agree with me that relationships are probably even better than paid informants on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, for sure, Tim. I got people been calling me since my Angola days in the 80s working there. May not hear from a year, 2 years, and all of a sudden that phone rings and they're like, hey man, I need to tell you something. Can we meet? And I'll go meet up with them. And they don't want to get paid. They don't want to get out of a charge. They just want to help the community. They see something that went down in their community, a robbery, a killing, a shooting, and they know how messed up it is, and they just want to get it off their chest. And so it's the community is the power is in the people, and cooperation and with the police agencies is a vital part of that.
Yeah, you said something really good. The power's in the people, and I always believe that if you have the people on your side and they trust you, look, I got 100, more than 100. I probably got 1,000 or more contacts in my phone. Everybody that I've ever came into contact with that has called me and given me information, I have them saved and stored. So I might not hear from somebody for 3 years, Darryl. I may get a phone call today and I'll have such and such from Street A, just so I'll know who they are. If we weren't necessarily good friends, we just associated on a case or something. And it's important for me to respect them enough to let them know that I know who they are, because they're taking the time out of their day to call and tell me, hey, I saw this, I saw that. I don't want to get involved, but this is who committed the crime. So, and Darryl made another good point. He and I both worked at the prison. I made contacts in the prison back in 1990 and 91 that I still correspond with. So people out there understand these cops, they're working hard to try and eliminate the very small portion of people that are committing violence, basically in any community, anywhere. And I'm speaking from Baton Rouge, East Baton Rouge Parish, and all the surrounding areas. I'm not talking about nationally. What goes on in New York, I have no clue. We in the South, we need to make sure that the community still opens up to us and realizes that they're the ones who can impact things more than me. Even in Baton Rouge, there's probably about 600 officers in Baton Rouge, all right? So 600, that's 1,200 eyes, right? Now there's 600,000 people in Baton Rouge. Now, if you got that many more people looking out, paying attention, it makes our job easier, right, Darryl?
Yeah, that's correct. Because, if the more contacts you got, your eyes and ears are out there.
And Darryl, let's tell our listeners one thing. We get raw information. We get information from confidential informants. We have to vet before we send it off, right? We can't just, if I call Darryl and say, hey, Darryl, JoJo on the block killed such and such, I've given Darryl a pathway, but Darryl has to figure out, like I said earlier, probable cause. He has to vet my information and then has to further that information before he can give it to a case detective. So typically when you get information, you'll vet it, right?
Yeah, we basically will once we get the information, we'll analyze it, research it, and just keep investigating. And if at some point we find out it's not good information, and then we'll shut that down. But I mean, we don't just take something that somebody says and say, oh, okay, that's the way it is. We usually go through a process on the information.
Yeah, because the word on the street ain't always 100% right. And, we can't make cases on conjecture. What you think happened, we still have to prove it. Let's talk about, before we end the podcast, let's talk about this. Specifically in the Baton Rouge area, the gangs I dealt with were young black males, and almost exclusively, I found the culture of these gangs that violence is respected and education is really not even something that most of these gang members, anywhere from 12 up to 17, 18, as they're still youth, they really don't care about education. They're disruptive in school, or they don't go to school. But in a culture where violence is respected, and sometimes people see that, rap music or something is the only way out if you don't play sports. Is there anything we can do as police officers or as a society to try and reach it before it's too late? The youngest gang member I dealt with was 12 years old, and he was a shooter. He committed armed robberies. He was just so deep into the violence that I felt like we did all we could, and we really couldn't save him. I felt like he was one that was just going to have to be incarcerated. But what can we do with some of these youngsters that we see maybe transitioning to the gang life? What's your opinion on, there's a few things that we can do to help them get back into the educational system and try and be on a better path?
Well, like you said, there's a lot of kids that are in crisis mode that the gangs scoop them up. Really, it takes a whole community. The sheriff's office, we do a really good job, in the city police. So we have community policing that go into the schools that do events for the kids in some of these areas that have some problems like that with children. And we also, have patrol deputies that get out there and they talk to these kids. But it takes the whole community, not just the law enforcement. It takes school teachers. Anybody can get involved to help these kids. The Longfellow group homes over behind Delmont Village back in the 90s, I used to be a truancy officer on my off days, and I would go to bring them pizzas, because these was all kids in dormitories, anywhere from diapers all the way to 16, 17 years old. So they're living in dorms, going to Prescott. So we would get in there and bring them pizzas, watch basketball games, spend time with them, stand outside and shoot ball with them a little bit, after school. Just get involved, communicate what their problems are. And some of them kids are grown men today. They see me, they come up and introduce me to their family. Unfortunately, some of them I've seen in the jail system that didn't go the way that we would hope it would. But, you have to get involved. Also, Youth Challenge is a great program. I'm a mentor in Youth Challenge. I've mentored a few kids in there. One of them, my latest one, just graduated out of Menden, and we got him in the Navy. He's in Washington, D.C. now. He actually is doing very well in the Navy. Just a great success story. With DJ, he's doing good. And another one, we had went to Camp Beauregard that I mentored. He's doing very well also. So the Youth Challenge program is a great program for these kids that kind of lose their way a little bit, to get them back focused on life and getting their goals, getting them to be positive as they become young adults.
Yeah, and I want the listeners to understand one thing. Cops really would rather not incarcerate people for the most part. There are some people that we target because of their violence, but we want these kids to be successful. We take no pride in putting a 12-year-old in jail, when we would rather see these kids not get involved in the gang life, go through the educational process, and prosper. I, too, have seen people. I saw a guy, I hadn't seen him for 15 years, and he came up to me in a restaurant, me and my wife. He's like, "Big head, man, I ain't seen you in a while." Now, this guy put in jail a few times, and we figured out it had been about 15 years since we seen each other. He had a wife, a kids, and everything. I went to the restroom, and as I was walking back, I took a few minutes to stop and talk to him, and I said, "Hey, man, I'm really proud of where you came compared to where you were." Now, 15 years, I don't see this guy, right? I see he's doing good. He's telling me where he works. He's got a lovely wife and outstanding looking kids, right? It's a nice restaurant, nothing really, just a steakhouse, but he's there spending time with his family. And maybe he didn't have that growing up. From what I remember about him, he was just kind of a badass, if you will, who just kept committing crimes and eventually went to jail. But we like to see the successful people. We don't have any bias towards saying, hey, we want to put all these people in jail or not. We would prefer not to put anyone in jail, but we have to target the violent people. But the people we can save, believe me, it warms our heart to see that we made a good, positive impact. And like Darryl said, they'll talk to him, they'll talk to me. If you're a street cop, you should never be worried about moving from point A to point B, because you should do your job correct and be fair but firm, and then you'll have the respect. They know that you have to put them in jail sometime. It's understandable. You're doing your job. They just want you to do it right. Young street cops understand this. You play a vital part in people's lives. Intelligence operatives, your job is to specifically target the very small segment of society that's disrupting the natural flow of people and their quality of life. So I want to say to Darryl, I've worked with you for many years, and you're one of the cops that I respect more than a lot. And I'm not saying anything derogatory about other people. It's just that you're an exceptional. I call you a cop. You're a sheriff deputy, but a cop's a cop. You still eat donuts and drink coffee, right?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Not much donuts, but the coffee, yes. I'm a big coffee drinker.
Well, you can always be associated with donuts and coffee, just like me, even though we probably hadn't had a donut in 20 years. But look, man.
Actually, I was at your ex-boss as an office the other day, and he brought in a box of donuts. We were having an intel meeting, and hey, you want some donuts? I said, nah, drink some coffee. But y'all got a brand of donuts y'all eat. I can't think of what's on the front of the box, but I notice every time they come with donuts, it's a certain donut shop. So it must be some good donuts.
Yeah, I don't know. I never was invited to a donut.
You city police, y'all eat them donuts a lot, I guess.
Yeah, we do. That's why on the front of my big head on the block thing, when we were putting it together, we put donuts on one side and handcuffs on the other. The job is, it's evolving, and it's really hard for police to get engaged. But I urge the officers out there to continue to have a rapport with the community, to go to people like Darryl, some of the older guys that are still there. And we pretty much all were like that coming up. We don't see those type of officers anymore, but young cops, pay attention to what the old cops are saying. Pay attention to what they're doing and watch what they're doing. And they'll give you some insight on how to engage the people and have them engage you, because it's important to have that rapport if you're going to be successful as a individual police officer and as a department. And I think that people think that the cops aren't doing much, but there's only so much police can do to help stop this violence. Anything in closing that you want to add, Darryl?
Yeah, just like when you talk about street cops, what is a street cop? A street cop's not a brawny guy. It's a guy that basically is good at working with the community. They got to know you care. If you tell them you're going to do something, you better do it, because if you don't, they're going to remember that. And I think that's with my career, which helped me so much, and working the areas I've worked in North Baton Rouge through my careers. No matter what the problem is, it can be getting a cat out of a tree. And that people remember that. If you give them a bad feeling, if you talk down to somebody, they're never going to forget that, because that's the moment they dealt with you, and that reflects on other officers too. So just being nice, treat people how you want people to treat your relatives, and you go a long way with this job. But a street cop, a lot of people think, oh, street cop is this type of individual. Really, it's somebody that can work in the community, and they're very effective because they work very close with the community. And that's the difference. And
look, I agree with you 100%. Now, both of us, I believe, have achieved the same level of respect. Even if I'm off duty, if I'm passing through and I see a gang member, I'm in my Challenger Scat Pack. I'll stop and wave at him and say, hey, what's up? Just to chat with him. Darryl and I move freely because we understand, and they understand, we do our job, but we fair about it. The community in general, in all of Baton Rouge, is comprised of very good people. A very small percentage of people out here offending. So make sure that when y'all listen to this podcast, you understand the context of that. We target very few people, because very few out of the hundreds of thousands in the Baton Rouge area are actually committing these crimes. And the sheriffs and the police departments, the police chiefs and stuff, they tell you that it's a small percentage of people, and they're telling you the truth. So understand that with your help, with the police officers doing their job, we hope to make a significant impact. And, we want your community to be safe, because guess what? We as cops and sheriff deputies, we're there all the time, right? You there 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week sometimes. So it's not like we want that place to be violent. If a cop has nothing to do, that's a good day for a cop. You think we want to respond to homicides or shootings, with multiple people involved? That's not the case. A cop would rather have zero to do. So just know that everybody's out here working to make the Baton Rouge and the greater Baton Rouge area a better place to live. You agree with me, Darryl?
Oh, for sure. It's a group effort. It takes everybody to work on improving the communities.
Well, look, man, I want to thank you for some of the insight and some of the dialogue we had. I think it was a good podcast, and I think people will get a lot out of it. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Big Head on the Block. I'm Tim Henderson, the host. I look forward to dropping another podcast soon. Please give us any comments, likes, dislikes, or any topics y'all would like to discuss. Thank you.